Yo, YouTube, what's good? It's Aeghis. In this video, I'm going to be recording the Cataclysm Frost Mage PvP guide, specifically tailored for arena, such as 2v2 or 3v3. So first of all, let's get right into it. Let's start with the talents. So with talents, we're going to be running 2 points into early frost. This will reduce the cast time of your frostbolt every 15 seconds. So I have a tracker here on my tell me when, right here, and we'll take a quick look at that. Basically, it's going to track the internal cooldown of it, Frostbolt, 15 seconds. It's going to just be a nice quick cast Frostbolt, and you'll have that every 15. So that tell me when is available in my Discord. That's how you're going to track that. Piercing Ice increase the critical chance of your spells by 3%. This is really good because Frost Mage is very reliant on critting with your Shatter, and that leads us into Shatter. Multiplies the critical strike chance of all your spells against frozen targets by 3 and increases damage done by Frostbolt against frozen targets by 20%. So let's look at the first part of this talent. Multiplies the crit chance of all of your spells against frozen targets by 3. This essentially means that whatever your crit chance is, it's going to be multiplied by 3 whenever they are frozen. So I have a 17% crit chance. If you multiply that by 3, it's, 51, I think, because 34 and then 17, yeah, it's 51. So I believe 17 is a very good number in this first season to kind of cap off your crit, because it basically ensures that you have more of a chance to crit than not when you shatter. And then you'll put the rest of your stats later on into mastery so that you increase the damage of your frost spells that do crit. We'll talk about that a bit later, but yeah, essentially that's what shatter does. And that's going to come through any type of frozen effect. So if you, root the target and he's frozen there, like root, spell into that will have the shatter bonus. Or if you have a fingers proc, it'll act like they are frozen. So you can see it'll crit. Well, it has a 51% chance to crit. And then we'll go into Ice Flows here. Reduces the cooldown of your Frost Nova, Cone of Cold, Ice Block, Cold Snap, Barrier, and Veins by 20%. Obviously, this talent is very insane. It's going to reduce the cooldown of all of your major defensives and your offensives, such as Icy Veins. And the lower cooldown on Cone and Barrier is insane as well, along with the Frost Nova. It just gives you more control overall. And the reason why the decreased cooldown on Cone is very strong is because of this talent, Improved Cone of Cold. Your Cone of Cold also freezes the target for 4 seconds. And what's cool about this is it's actually on its own DR, right? So it says for 4 seconds. So if I full Frost Nova for 8 seconds on this guy, and it was on the same DR as Cone, the Cone would be 2 because it would be half, right? But you can see when I Cone, it's still 4 seconds. So it's really strong because of that. It's actually like one of the coolest talents, or the strongest talents that you have. So you have 2 different DR routes. Piercing Chill, we're going to skip over this for now because it's kind of a low value talent that your Frostbolt crits will apply chill to the nearby enemies. There's just better talents in the tree. Permafrost, your chill effects reduce the target's speed by an additional 10%. That part is for one crazy, because whenever you slow people, it's just going to be 10% more. And in addition, the target's healing received, the target's healing received. So you also have a kind of a pseudo mortal strike effect. So whenever you have chill effects on the enemy, it's also going to reduce that amount of healing, the 10%. So whenever I Frostbolt, now that he has a chill on him, you can see the second part of that debuff there, healing received, reduced by 10%. Very strong. And then you'll see at the end, in addition, whenever your spells deal whenever you deal spell damage, your welly is healed for 15% of that amount. This is kind of a part of the talent that's often overlooked on Permafrost, because welly is actually susceptible to dying, and you can kind of heal it up the more damage you're doing. So Ice Shards adds a chill effect to your Blizzard and increases the range of your Ice Lance spell. Now, this talent isn't that valuable. You would think that the range on Lance would be nice, because it would go up to about 39 yards if you put 2 points into that. But it's actually not that valuable, because if you play it only for the Lance increase on yards, you're actually still not getting a lot of value out of it, because you're essentially negating the other part of the talent, which is the Blizzard. You don't really ever press Blizzard too much, except for when you're trying to keep people from re-stealthing, because look at how much mana Blizzard costs. That's like 14%, 14%, 14%. Like I've only casted 3 and I'm almost to half mana now. So not too valuable there. Icy Veins, 2.4-minute cooldown, hastens your spell casting, increasing the spell casting speed by 20%, reduces the pushback suffered from damaging attacks while casting by 100%, and lasts 20 seconds. So this is really, really good, because if you look at how, let's just take a sheep cast, for example, 1.68 seconds. So slow, right? But when you veins, your casting speed is very much increased, and this is going to help you do a lot of damage very quick. And another cool part about veins is you can see like the global cooldown on your abilities, right? It kind of is going by a little quicker, whereas if you didn't have veins, your GCD is a lot slower. So this is going to be really strong because it's going to help you not only just cast faster, but your global cooldown on all your spells is going to be reduced as well, allowing you to use them back to back a lot more efficiently. So Fingers of Frost give your offensive chill effects a 20% chance to grant you Fingers of Frost, which cause your next Ice Lance or Deep Freeze to act as if your target was frozen, and also increases Ice Lance damage by 25%. Fingers of Frost can accumulate up to 2 charges and last 15 seconds. So this is going to be these procs that you get here. So with these procs, you can either Deep Freeze or you can Ice Lance, and that will consume those. And the reason we got those from the Pet Nova is because of this. Gives your Welly Freeze a 100% chance to grant 2 charges of Fingers of Frost when it strikes the enemy target. Now you actually have to land your Pet Nova for this. You can see here in a sec that if you don't land the Pet Nova on the target, you won't actually get the fingers from it. So it's very important to make sure that you're landing that so you can get those 2 fingers procs. Now we have Enduring Winter here. So this is kind of a weird talent. The reason I put 1 point into it is because, as you'll see later in the Frost Tree, you're kind of left over with 1 point. Like you're forced to put 1 point somewhere so you can go down to deep. And this is going to be the talent that I decided. You basically have an option. You could put 1 in Piercing, 1 in Shards, 1 in Enduring. These 2 talents are pretty much no value, so we won't be putting 1 in there. The reason I picked Enduring is because it reduces the mana cost of all your spells by 3%. And the reason I think this is more valuable is because Spell Steal is actually very expensive. So this kind of helps you be able to spell steal maybe a little bit more often. Makes spell stealing just a little bit less bad to do, spamming it. So that's the reason we're going into Enduring. Then we have Cold Snap. This is going to instantly reset the cooldown on all of your frost spells that you've recently cast. But what that essentially means is, I'll go over the abilities right now. So it's Frostfire Orb, Frost Nova, Ice Barrier, Ice Block, Ring of Frost, Deep Freeze, and Icy Veins. I'm actually not sure if it resets Cone of Cold. We could test that real quick. Here, I'll do it on my other mage. Let me tab over. So here, now I'm on Aeghis. So I'll just Cone of Cold Snap, and yes, it does. It does. You guys will have to take my word for that. Here, I'll prove it. There you go. And then we have Brain Freeze. So Brain Freeze is going to make your frost damaging spells with a chilling effect have a 15% chance to cause your next Frostfire Bolt or Fireball spell to be instant cast and cost no mana. When Frostfire Bolt is instant, it can benefit from Fingers of Frost. So what this essentially means is that you can see whenever I get a proc here of a Frostfire Bolt, we'll just wait for it. Should be popping up. There it is. So you can see I have 1 Fingers and 1 Brain Freeze. This essentially means that I can consume them both at one time. Now, I'll go into it later on why that is not as valuable as just using the Fingers and the Brain Freeze separately. But for now, let's continue. So, Ice Barrier, 24-second cooldown, instantly shields you, absorbing 13,000 damage, lasts 1 minute. And when you have it up, spellcasting will not be delayed by damage. So that essentially means, like, here, I'll have this guy auto-attack me. So when I cast here, you can see there's like a little bit of a... Sorry, I have a staff on, so it's a... Yeah, you can see the spell get pushed back there. When you have barrier up, that won't be the case. There'll be basically there'll be no pushback. Ice Barrier is spell stealable, so you can see on my other mage, I can steal it. It's a magic buff. And then we'll go down. Frostfire Orb. Your Frostfire Orb gains a chill effect, and that's the most important part about this talent, is that it gains the chill effect. And remember how we're generating Fingers procs. Gives your offensive chill effects a 20% chance to get your Fingers. So that's the main purpose of your orb, is that it is going to generate you a lot of Fingers of Frost procs. I'll just go ahead and read the rest of the talent. Gains a chill effect, slowing targets damaged by the Frostfire Orb by 40%. In addition, reduces the speed of targets slowed by your Frostfire Bolt chill effect by an additional 20%. So definitely not a bad talent. Like I said, it's going to make your orb be able to generate you fingers procs due to the fact that it has a chill effect on it. And it does a okay amount of damage too. You can see it ticks for a little bit, you know. But the main part is like, look at, you're just generating fingers. There's another one, another one. So yeah, it's kind of how you're going to generate a lot of instant damage when you're trying to do a go on someone. So now let's read the rest of the talents here on the other side of the tree. So we have, actually we have Deep Freeze. So Deep Freeze stuns the target for 5 seconds. It's only usable on frozen targets. So you can either do this into a Nova, or you can do this with your Fingers of Frost procs. And then you can see that part at the end. It's only PvE. Deals 18,000 to 19,000 damage to targets that are permanently immune to stuns. That part is strictly meaning that on like a raid boss or something, you could Deep Freeze and do damage with it. In PvP, that has no merit. So you can see if I root him, the Deep Freeze is available. Also, if I get a Fingers proc, it's also available. It lights up. And then it'll stun the target. And then that, all your damage into that will count as Shatter because the target is frozen. So now we'll go into the other talents that you'll take on the other tree. So the first one is Arcane. Improved Counterspell. Your Counterspell also silences the target for 4 seconds. So this is really cool because normally Counterspell is like an interrupt, right? Let's say I'm casting and the mage kicks me. I'm locked out for 8 seconds. But you can also use it a different way. You can also just straight up use it and it'll just silence the target for 4 seconds. And what's really cool is if you actually kick someone, you're blanketed. Well, that's what we call it. We call it a blanket silence. You're actually blanketed over the kick. So it locks them out for 4 seconds on all schools. So if I'm casting here, or sorry, let me do this the other way. If I'm casting and I kick, you can see I still have the improved counterspell debuff, so I also can't cast my other schools for while that MCS is on me. So Blazing Soul reduces the casting time lost from taking damaging attacks by 70%. This talent's very good because as a mage, you're going to get trained a lot, so you're always going to have melees on you if you're fighting them, or they're going to have, or you're going to have pets on you, and you know your casts are going to just continuously get knocked back. This is going to reduce that by 70%. Very nice. Increases the critical strike chance of your Fire Blast spell by 8%, and increases the range by 10 yards. And the reason why this one is better, because like essentially this one is nice, right? But you need 2 more to go down. So you have to pick either between Master of Elements, your spell criticals will refund 15% of their base mana cost, or your Imp Fire Blast. Now, the reason why the range by 10 yards is very important on Fire Blast is because of impact. So this is going to read this talent here, Impact, giving your damaging spells a 10% chance to reset the cooldown on Fire Blast and cause the next Fire Blast you cast to stun the target for 2 seconds and spread any fire damage over time effects to nearby enemies within 12 yards. That part is for fire exclusively because you don't really have any fire damaging over time effects as Frost. What Impact essentially is for Frost Mage is just a form of micro CC. So anytime you get an Impact, you have the ability to simply stun a target for 2 seconds, and it's on its own DR as well, so it will not DR with your Deep Freeze. And the reason why, going back to the improved Fire Blast, you want a 40-yard range on this so that you can, you know, use that Fire Blast without having to actually get closer to the target, because all of your other spells are about 35 to 40, so you want to not have to give up positioning to walk closer. And you don't really ever have mana problems as a Frost Mage. We'll go into that a little bit later. And then you'll put your last point here into Blazing Speed. Some mages play 1 less in Impact and go 2 in Blazing. We'll go over that in a second, but basically to explain Blazing Speed, it gives you a 5% chance when hit by a melee or ranged attack to increase your movement speed by 50% and dispels all effects that prevent movement, and it lasts 8 seconds. So you can essentially think about this: whenever you take damage, you have a chance to just instantly cleanse your snares, and you'll get a 50% movement increase. This is really strong into melees. So you have to kind of make a decision here. You could put 2 in here, which will help you kite more. You'll get more procs of Blazing Speed, but you'll get less procs of Impact. So you could think of putting 2 in here as the more defensive option, or 2 in impact as the more offensive option, because impact will give you more micro CC. So, yep, you guys can make that decision for yourself. We'll start going over glyphs now. So glyph number 1, first prime glyph. So we have 3 different types. We have prime, major, and minor. So Frostbolt will be our first prime glyph, increases the critical strike chance of your Frostbolt spell by 5%. Don't think I really need to talk about why this is good. You know, the more chance that your spells have to crit, the more it's multiplied by shatter, and then the more it's multiplied by shatter means it's more guaranteed to crit. The more you crit, the better, because your mastery and because of shatter, or actually just because of mastery. So we'll go over that real quick, our mastery. All of your spells deal 22% increased damage against frozen targets, and then each point of mastery increases damage by an additional 2.5%. So yeah, when you shatter these spells, every point of mastery is going to increase it by an additional 2.5. That's obviously going to mean that anytime you deal damage to a frozen target, or you have your Ice Lance procs, you're going to be doing that much more damage. So increasing the crit chance of this is also going to synergize with shatter as well, increase the damage done by Frostbolt against frozen targets by 5%. So you want that to always be critting. And then we'll go into the next glyph here, Glyph of Ice Lance. Increase the damage of your Ice Lance spell by 5%. This is obviously really good as well. Ice Lance is going to be a major source of your damage. I just had a Q session, actually. I'll go over some of the games. You can see like Ice Lance, top damage. It's 50% of my damage in that game. Go over this one. Ice Lance again. Ice Lance again. You guys get the point, right? Ice Lance is a major part of your damage, increasing that by 50% or 5%. Very valuable. And now for this last glyph, there's 2 different options that people play. So the one I play is Glyph of Mage Armor. The reason why is because it'll make your Mage Armor regenerate 20% more mana. So this is going to go from 3% mana to 4% on the Mage Armor. Now, you might be wondering, why are we not taking Frostfire Bolt glyph? Because it increases the damage done by 15%. The reason why is that last little line there, but no longer reduces the victim's movement speed. So this actually means that you're getting rid of the snare part of the spell. And what that essentially means is that when you throw Frostfire Bolt, it's not going to count as a chill effect. And when it doesn't count as a chill effect, it doesn't have a chance to grant you a Fingers of Frost proc. So you're essentially removing the chance of getting a Ice Lance from it for 15% damage on it. And the reason why the 15% damage is less valuable than the chance of getting an Ice Lance is because you never really want to be spending your Fingers of Frost procs on a Frostfire Bolt. It's more value to treat those procs. Here, I'll show you. Like, once I get a Frostfire, this will be more clear. Hopefully we get one. So if I used a Frostfire Bolt, it would consume 2 procs and then I would only have 1 lance. However, if I were to do it the other way, I would get 3 procs. So I would send in 1 lance, then a Frostfire. So that's 3 hard-hitting instant cast spells over 2. And that's called, I believe it's called crunching. You don't want to, like, I don't know if it's like you don't want to crunch or you do want to crunch, but either way, the fact of the matter is you rarely want to use your Frostfire Bolt procs with your Ice Lance. So I think not running this glyph is better because you're already kind of not playing around the damage of Frostfire Bolt as much. You're mainly just all-inning on Ice Lance, and then the Frostfire Bolt procs are like when you run out of Ice Lances, essentially. So I think having it there as a way of generating more Ice Lance procs is going to be more beneficial than increasing the damage of it. So now we'll move on to the minor glyphs. So we have a couple options here. You can see the first one. This one is absolutely mandatory. Glyph of Polymorph. Your Polymorph spell also removes all damage over time effects from the target. So that is going to ensure that you can sheep anyone in the arena. So you don't really have like a ton of dots on Frost, but the people that you're going to be playing with are going to have dots, and you want to always guarantee that you can sheep, that whenever you sheep a target, it won't just break to random, dots that are already on them. So then we're going to be going into Glyph of Evo. Your Evocate ability also causes you to regain 40% of your health over its duration. So this is really good because it's like essentially a heal. You have another option over Evo that you could play, and that would be Ice Barrier Glyph. So that is going to increase the damage absorbed by your Ice Barrier by 30%. I believe this comes down to personal preference as to which one you want to play, either Glyph of Evo or Barrier. I think both are good in their own ways. So the way I think about it is that Barrier technically gets more value, right? Because how many times are you barriering in one WoW game? It's probably a fair amount, right? I don't know if there's like a way to check that, like how many times I'm pressing it in certain games, but Evocate is a 4-minute cooldown. So basically the Glyph is only going to get value like once, maybe twice in a game, if the game really goes on very long. So you can kind of make that decision for yourself. I kind of like the clutch factor that Glyph of Evo has. Like if my healer gets CC'd and I'm able to run around the corner from 2 people from the DPS that are trying to kill me, and I can get an Evo off and heal myself while he's in CC, I like having that option. Although I do recognize how Ice Barrier Glyph is technically more value throughout a game because of how often you're pressing Ice Barrier. So you can kind of make that decision for yourself as to which one you want. And then the last Glyph that we're going to run is going to be Glyph of Frost Armor. Your Frost Armor also causes you to regenerate 2% of your maximum mana. So the reason why this is really good is because it gives you the option to swap out of Mage Armor and play Frost Armor into stuff that is going to be primarily physical damage. One example I can think of is, let's say I'm fighting a Thug Cleave in 3v3. That's going to be Hunter Rogue. So Hunter Rogue is a lot of damage into Mage. They're going to train you pretty hard. So you want that extra physical damage reduction by 15%. It's not just armor. It's not armor. It's 15% damage reduction physical. So that's very strong. But the problem with Frost Armor, if you don't have the Glyph, is that you actually go because you have no passive MP5, which stands for mana per 5 seconds. So this is going to make it to where playing Frost Armor isn't punishable, really. Like, you could play Frost Armor and you still will never go now. Normally, you want to just sit in Mage Armor because Mage Armor is very strong. It regenerates 4% of your maximum mana, and the duration of all harmful magic effects are reduced by 35%. Also, the resistances to all magic schools is a factor, but most people have spell pen cap, so it's not going to really do anything. And then, yeah, so that's basically why we're running Frost Armor. And then the minor glyphs, the only one that's absolutely necessary is Glyph of Slowfall. These ones are more or less just like, oh, and this one as well, because reducing the mana cost of your intellect buff or your arcane brilliance spell is going to ensure that you can rebuff mid-game without worrying about the consequence of ooming yourself. So rebuffing is a little bit less punishable mid-game if you get purged on it, for example. And your buff is very important. Your buff is 2,000 mana and 6% spell power. So 6% spell power is definitely not a small amount. You definitely want to make sure you have your buff up at all times, especially if you get purged. There's always going to be a goal to reapply it. You want to make sure you're doing that. And this is going to make that cost a little bit less. Slowfall is another magic buff, actually. So if you guys are coming from like retail, for example, Slowfall is a completely useless button in Arena. This is not the case in CATA. It's actually a magic debuff. So if I switch over to my other monitor here, or my other mage, you can see if I put up all of my buffs, or sorry, let me go in this guy. If I put up all my buffs, you can see there's a lot more to purge, right? And Slowfall is one of them. So you have a less % chance to get spell stolen on your important ones. See, I got the Slowfall over the Mage Ward or the Mana Shield there, for example. So yeah, Slowfall is going to be really nice. And unless you have a million light feathers, then you need this glyph. So now let's go over the gear a little bit. So I just want to go over the BIS Frost gear here, the BIS list that I have kind of, put together. So let me find that real quick. Found it. Oh, actually, this is my character currently. So if you guys are gearing from scratch. You're in full, like you just hit 85. What you want to do is you want to farm battlegrounds so that you can buy these blue bloodthirsty pieces, and essentially you're just going to buy the blue versions of the purple gear, the ones that have like the same stats on them. So I don't actually have a pre-bis list, but what you want to do is you just want to copy pretty much the bis list and then find the pieces of blue gear that have the same stats. So I'm going to go over some of these pieces. You can see it's primarily PvP gear. So we have the spell pen neck. And the reason why we're doing that is because that allows us to buy the mastery cape. There is also a spell pen cape, but that isn't going to be the best for Frost Mage because that would mean that you wouldn't want the spell pen neck and you'd have to get the other neck, which is a haste neck. And on Frost Mage, you really want to stack. You can see we're not stacking pretty much any haste at all. We're going full crit, and then the rest of that is going to go into mastery. So in our bis gear, we'll have around 14% mastery, 14.61, and we're still at that 17% crit cutoff. And then, yeah, we have our 200 spell pen. That 200 spell pen is going to come from the neck. And then, yeah, the rest of it is basically like just to talk about the stat priority now. Intellect is absolutely king. Intellect is so strong. So in CATA, intellect essentially does a couple things. Increases your mana, increases your spell power, and increases your spell crit hit. So that's going to help you quite a bit. So, yeah, intellect is obviously very nice because it does 3 different things. Spell pen is just going to ensure that you don't get resisted on certain things. So, and then haste, obviously it's kind of sucks that we have to play with 0% haste, but you're kind of playing around your icy veins windows is the idea. You want to stack the crit so that your shatter becomes more consistent, and then you want to stack the mastery so that when you do crit, your spells are actually doing a lot of damage, right? So I'm going to refer you guys to this for the gear. I won't go over every single individual piece. If you scroll down, you'll see pretty much where to get everything. When it says like source enchanting, that doesn't mean that you need to become an enchanter. It just means that's the source of you need to like find an enchanter or whatever. But the professions that you guys will want to go is you'll see this gem here requires you to be a jeweler. So these gems are very nice because it's 17 more intellect than the ones you can buy off the auction house. So you want to become a JC for these. And then the other one that you want is tailoring because you can get this light weave embroidery. And what that's essentially going to do is it's going to give you a proc that gives you 580 intellect on certain, or sorry, tailoring. I don't know what I said before, but yeah, tailoring. You want tailoring. And that's going to give you a proc for 580 intellect whenever you cast a spell. So you're going to have a lot of these trinkets and stuff, like Soul Casket is another one of your bis trinkets. You get this from heroic farming. You can get valor points. It takes 2 weeks, like one cap is 1600, and then you need one more heroic the next week to get you enough valor, I believe, to buy it. It's pretty easy to get. Actually, probably one of the easiest bis trinkets that it's the easiest of the trinkets because you don't actually have to spend any gold. And then you have 2 options here. Thoralian's Mirror is bis for sure because it gives you baseline intellect and then gives you a big mastery proc, 2178. That's a lot. However, if you don't want to raid, because that actually drops from the Bastion of Twilight and Thoralian, but if you don't want to do heroic raiding or just raiding in general, then you can just stick with the Dark Moon card Volcano because that'll have a base amount of mastery, but then it'll grant you like a smaller in comparison amount of intellect to the mirror. So, and the way you get this is basically just from the auction house. It's like 30k, something like that. A little bit expensive, might be depending on when you're watching this, but yeah, like I said, refer to this if you guys have any questions about the gearing. And then the reforging, check out my add-ons video on YouTube. That will show you how to use Reforged Lite, and that will make sure that you guys can consistently get this nice stat layout while you're gearing, because you're not going to have the perfect stat layout while you're gearing, right? Because you have a couple blue pieces, but Reforged Lite will make sure that you stay at 4%, then 17%, and then you want to fill in the mastery after that. So basically just as you're gearing, your mastery is just going to be a bit lower, because you definitely want to have these 2 thresholds as you're gearing. Like, no matter your gear, you want to have 4% hit, and you want to have 17% chance to crit. And then the mastery will go up as you get more gear. So I think that covers the stat priority, the professions, the talents, all that kind of stuff, all the basics, all the boring stuff, you know. So now let's start to go into each of our spells. So I'm just going to go down the list here, and we can talk about individual abilities and how to get the most value out of them. So Icy Veins, we've already kind of talked about this, but increases your haste, lowers your GCD. Soul Casket is a nice trinket that we have. It's going to increase our spell power. It's an on use. What I recommend doing here is having 2 separate veins binds. So you can see here, if I actually unhide the macro text and the keybind text for all of my bars, which I will do for the sake of this video. I think it looks clean having them hidden, so that's what I do. But you can see I have a veins macro here, and this veins macro will automatically use Soul Casket. But I have a separate veins macro because there are times you want to veins, but you don't want to commit your on-use trinket. So I recommend having 2 different keybinds for that, one that pops both, one that pops only veins. Ring of Frost is a really cool spell. Summons a Ring of Frost taking 3 seconds to coalesce. Enemies entering the fully formed ring will become frozen for 10 seconds. So this is a really cool spell. In this expansion, it's actually instant cast, 2-minute cooldown. Keep in mind that is reset by Cold Snap. So just to show you what that looks like, we can do this. So you can see, after a couple seconds, it has a an arm timer. So if I go onto this guy and I can kind of move through it, right? It's not going to hit me. But it went away there. I'll do it on this guy. See, look, it takes a second. I'm not exactly rung yet, right? And then it triggers. So it has like a little bit of a delay on it. So when you're using this ability, you want to make sure that you kind of captivate the target. So a really cool way that you can use this ability to cross healers, like crowd control them, is Nova into Blanket Silence with our improved counterspell, and then you can drop a Ring of Frost on them. So that'll look something like this. Oh, sorry, there we go. And yeah, that'll ensure that they stay inside the ring. They can't dispel themselves. The silence and the Nova have to be at the same time. You can also use this to just drop it on pillars. Like if you just want to put it on a pillar to kite around so they can't chase you is very good. It's another decent way to use it. And then the Ring of Frost, actually when they're frozen, you can shatter into that as well. So it's an additional way to land a shatter. Counterspell, we've already talked about this. You can see here I have a couple different macros. I'll show my hidden bars here as well, bar 9 and 10. So I have quite a bit of CS macros. So we'll go into that a little bit. I'll also show you guys the Veins macro real quick. So that's going to be the Veins macro. That's going to auto-activate the trinket. You just want to make sure that the on-use trinket is on the bottom slot, and that'll use it. And then back to the counterspell, we have quite a bit of macros here. So we have CS 1, 2, and 3 for Arena 1, 2, 3. And what we have in these is dismount and stop casting. So what that's going to do is if you're casting a spell and I press CS, it'll cast, or it'll cancel the cast to ensure that whenever you press CS, it'll go off. That's essentially a really nice quality of life part of the macro, because you don't want to be casting and then have to kick a really fast cast or something and then it just not go off because you're too busy casting, right? Basically, you want CS to go off when you press it, and that's what the macro will do. So I have that set for Arena 1, 2, and 3, so you can instantly kick on the frames. You'll see like Arena 1 kick will kick the first guy, Arena 2, second, 3, so on. And then I have 2 other ones as well. So just a normal CS macro for out in the world. So I can like counterspell people in duels, battlegrounds, all that kind of stuff. And same with a focus as well. And this is going to be how you are like kicking pets and such, like Gargoyle or the monkey from Hunters, so you can kick bad manner, stuff like that. Those are what those macros are for. And then we have Blink. Blink is a instant cast, 15-second cooldown, teleports the caster 20 yards forward unless something is in the way. Also frees the caster from stuns and bonds. So this is Blink is really cool because if I stun. If I'm in a stun, I can just blink out. So mages are actually really susceptible, not susceptible to being locked down in stuns. The only part is if you use it for, let's say, like mobility. You're just running around and someone's running from you and you decide to chase them. Now, because he blinked, I can deep freeze him and he can't blink it because it's on cooldown. So you have to be a little bit careful with that spell sometimes. But yeah, it's very, very, very good spell. Ice Barrier absorbs damage, purgeable, 25-second cooldown. And then we have the human racial, so we'll talk a little bit about the racials now. Human is going to by far be the best race for Mage, because essentially it gives you this really overpowered racial, which is essentially the trinket. Removes all movement impairing effects, so you can use that on literally anything. You can use it on Cyclone, Polymorph, stuns, even silences in this expansion. So you can see, like, if I blanket the target, you can even trinket silences. That's something you couldn't do before. You cannot trinket a lockout though. So if I get kicked, let's say this mage is casting a frostbolt and I kick it, you can't trinket the frost lockout, just so you guys know that. And yeah, human is really good because it allows you to not wear a trinket to gain that effect. You're allowed to use double offensive trinkets, and that's going to increase your damage by a lot. And then there is another, yeah, increase your intellect by 5% as well. I'm not sure if that's part of human or just being mage, but you get the point. Human's OP. So now let's keep going down the list. Deep freeze stuns the target. We've already discussed this ability. It allows you to shatter targets, allows you to stun them. It's cool. Mages have a stun. Deep freeze, you know, we've been wanting that forever as a retail player, so it's cool to finally have it. You can use Fingers of Frost procs for this, or you can just root them. So Orb, launch the Frostfire Orb, does damage, generates you Fingers of Frost procs. Welly is actually permanent in this expansion. You can just cast it and you have it out forever. There is something to be said about having your binds for Welly. So you want to have a lot of things bound on your Welly. You want to have your Pet Nova. That one is literally the most important. Like, if you don't have Pet Nova bound, what are you doing? Because then you can't Frostbolt, Pet Nova, Shatter. That's going to be your like main source of damage. It's going to generate your Fingers procs very easily. So having that bound on something comfortable is very crucial. And then you can keep the Water Bolt on, like, you could right click this, or you could keep it off. Your pet's on passive most of the time anyway, so this doesn't matter really. But I do recommend having these things bound: Pet Attack, and Pet Follow, and Pet Move To. So I actually have a macro for that right here. Pet Move To. You want to be able to control where your pet is, and then also you want to have this bound so that when you want him to follow you, he'll follow you. So something cool with this, let's say your healer is getting trapped, right? Scatter into trap. You can try to eat it with your Welly, right? Or if you're getting trapped, and let's say your Welly's over here attacking the mage, you get scattered, you just press Pet Follow, and he'll instantly come back to you and potentially eat it. It is quicker to use, like if I have him over here, Pet Follow, it actually is more movement speed. See, look, if I tell him to walk over here, it's kind of slow, right? But if I press Pet Follow, see how quick he comes back? So it's like a little little nice tip there. And then, yeah, having the Pet Attack bind, so you can tell him to attack whenever. And then you also have the Pet Follow bind for if, like, let's say you're going this guy and he uses the defensives, your rogue says, like, I want a blind. You don't want your Welly to bolt the blind and break it, right? So then you just click your Pet Follow macro to get him off. And there are some handy macros for that as well. We'll talk a little bit about them. So I have a Pet Attack in my Frostbolt, and I actually have a separate Frostbolt that doesn't have Pet Attack either. So the reason why that's kind of important is when you burst someone like this, like you're just doing a normal burst rotation, you want your pet to start attacking, and it's kind of awkward to have to like always press Pet Attack separately. So you want to have it into your Frostbolt, because your Frostbolt, you're pretty much only pressing that when you're killing people anyways. Like, you're not going to press Frostbolt on some random target. But sometimes you are going to Frostbolt, but you don't want the pet to potentially break the Nova, because essentially sometimes if you Frostbolt into a Nova, and your pet has a chance to kind of break it a little early if you've already done some damage into it, So I have it for that purpose. It's really, really niche. You could probably get away without having it. Just have pet attack in the Nova. Or sorry, in the Frostbolt macro. And then one more pet macro is to have pet passive in your polymorphs. So this essentially means like if I'm attacking this guy, but then I need to sheep him, your pet won't continue casting and break the sheep as it lands. Like let's look at an alternative, right? Let me just put normal polymorph on my bars here. So let's say I have my pet on him and then I cast sheep on him. It's like the pet didn't know to stop attacking, so then it just breaks the sheep, right? So you need that. And then, yeah, that's all there really is to know about the Welly. Like I said, just keep that on passive and have your pet control, practice your pet control, and have those necessary keybinds for it. Then we have mirror images. So mirror images is kind of an interesting spell. Creates 3 copies of the caster nearby, which casts spells and attacks the mage's enemy targets. So this spell is like, it's hit or miss, right? Because let's say you're playing a comp like RMP. You almost never want to press it because the mirrors are not smart. The mirrors don't understand when targets are in CC or not. So it breaks a lot of crowd control when you have them out. You can't control them with pet passive or pet attack. They have a mind of their own. Like they'll truly hit whoever they want. So I kind of have this rule where I don't really press this in arena often unless it's like a really panic situation where I kind of need to like summon some slows off me. Like I need to like summon mages who are going to cast frostbolts on people and keep them snared. But you have to be very careful with pressing it. They do now in duels, they're really good, right? Because they actually see like why are they hitting the welly? Like no one told them to hit the welly. So I'm telling you guys, they have a mind of their own. Whoa, wait. Every time I hit pet follow, they stop casting. Did I just learn something? What if I hit pet attack on mage? No, it doesn't work. Yeah, this spell is really inconsistent, like I said, so just avoid pressing this when you are trying to set up goes and you need important crowd control to sit. But it is worth pressing it in like 1v1 situations or whatever. It's good to kind of press before you do like a lot of damage because they'll add a little bit of damage on the go. It doesn't add that much. It's like really min-max because they only hit for like 900. So in my eyes, it's not really worth summoning them and potentially breaking an important CC for like an added 900 something damage or whatever per attack. So yeah, like I said, kind of a weird spell to find value in sometimes. Most of the time I think that you would be better off not even having it on your bars in arena, but it has its place sometimes ish. Really good in duels though. And then we have mana gem, so you'll craft that with conjure mana gem, and then this basically just gives you the ability to restore mana. So if we like use mana, we can restore it. Not bad. Always good to use that kind of early. Like let's say you are somehow spending a lot of mana, you know, using it to kind of top off and get it on cooldown so that you could get more of them in a game rather than completely ooming and then being like, oh shit, I need to gem, and then you gem, it brings you up like a little bit and then it still has a 2-minute cooldown. You'd rather just use it when you're like a little bit lower on mana, get it on cooldown, top yourself off, and then if you somehow end up getting again, it'll be off cooldown by then, hopefully. Evocate, gain 15% of your mana and 10% of your health instantly. The health part is only because we're running the glyph, by the way. And another 45% of your total mana and 30% of your total health. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see. That's just because of the glyph, the health part, though. Yeah, so if I do some damage to my mage, my ult has no gear, so I'm doing 0 deeps. You can see, let me also spend some mana. So kind of like 60% on both, you evo, and it tops you. Now you need to be really careful when you channel this. Like you need to really position yourself in a way where you know you won't get interrupted. So let's take this for example. This is, we'll call this like a pillar on the grand arena. You get behind the pillar, you start evoing, and then the mage is like coming to you to counterspell him. Like you don't want to be in a position to get kicked on this spell. So like you want to try to use everything in your power to keep the mage over there so that you can get the full channel off, right? Like whether that comes from cone rooting, going around the corner and getting the evo off. Like essentially you really want to make sure you don't want to get caked on this. You can kind of think of it like shifting power on retail if there's any retail players. But yeah. So block, 4-minute cooldown, you become immune to everything. And then you get hypothermia, which makes you not be able to block for another 30 seconds. So blocking in CATA is very interesting, especially from a retail perspective where you have heal blocks, so you always want to block at like the lowest amount of HP. On CATA, it's a lot different. You don't have heal block in this expansion. So what I always used to call this was like there was 2 types of blocks on retail. There was a block for heal, and there was a block for value. So on CATA, you almost always want to do the block for value, like every single time. This means essentially there's 2 different schools of thought. Let's say you had the heal blocker and you're coming from retail. The goal was to, like, you know, as soon as your healer gets in CC and they pop big cooldowns, maybe you can try to run and kite it out a little bit or whatever. And then if you were finally forced to block or whatever, it was fine at low HP because you could instantly just heal back up. Versus blocking for value, which is, let's say your healer gets scatter trapped, the hunter pops rapid fire, and the feral pops berserk. It's like you almost always want to block as soon as the CC lands on the healer, so that you can block at a high enough amount of HP to where when your healer comes out of CC, he doesn't have a mountain of damage to heal through. Like if you block at 1%, there's a lot of times you can die through if stuff like that happens. So trying to figure out, you know, when is the best time to block is kind of a tricky thing in CATA, or it can be at first. But you almost always want to look for them on blocks for value. So like whenever people pop cooldowns, you kind of respect it instantly, right? Like there are times where you can kind of outplay people positionally, and that will make you be able to hold block in situations. But if you are in a position where you can't avoid damage and it's going to be a couple of globals for you to get away, that's when you're going to want to trade the block. But let's say your healer gets scatter trapped and the hunter is like right here, and I'm kind of like able to blink out of line. Obviously, if he pops a rapid fire and the feral pops a berserk, you're not just going to block over here, right? Like this is a time where you can like start greeting it. But yeah, and then we'll go into our other spells. So Ice Lance is going to be your main damaging spell. So it's a damage doubled against frozen targets. You essentially just get procs from a lot of different things, such as orb. Your Fingers of Frost procs are going to give you instant Ice Lances. Those are going to do big damage. Yeah, like I said, it's your main source of damage. Frostbolt is really good to cast when you can shatter it. So like a Frostbolt like this is going to be way less value. That one RNG crit, thankfully, but yeah, when you can shatter them and pretty much like almost guarantee the crit, they do a lot of damage. And especially like if they crit on its own versus critting when it's shattered, the shatter is going to increase the damage a lot. So yeah, Frostbolt, it's kind of like sometimes you're not going to be able to get the Frostbolt off. I'll lay out an example. Like you cross the healer with, you know, Nova Blanket Ring. So you like Nova Ring, cross him. Let's say you're fighting like a lock, right? And he has a pet out. That's something like it's kind of sketchy to cast the bolt there, right? Sometimes it's better in this. Like you got to think of the Frostbolt as being kind of a greedy cast, right? Like you want to get it off because it's almost a guaranteed kill if you get it off. But if you're going to be interrupted on it, it's not worth it. You'd rather just send the Pet Nova and then do your 2 lances. And then like ideally orb before that as well, so you can generate more on the go. So that's just something to think about with Frostbolt. And then you can see the early Frost proc that we have that we talked about at the start. That's going to decrease the cast time of it. Keep in mind there is kind of I don't know if it's a bug or whatever, but you can see that. Watch the cast speed, okay? I don't know if it's going to track on the tooltip, but we'll see. So 1.35 second cast time with early Frost. If you start the cast and then cancel it when you have early Frost, it actually eats the proc for some reason. I think that might be bugged. So yeah, 1.35. If you start the cast and cancel it, you can see it goes back up to 192. So I don't know if that's a bug. If it is, Blizzard, please fix that. But when you have that early Frost proc, just make sure that if you press it, it's like at a time that you can definitely get it off or whatever, because you don't want to eat the proc for no reason. Fire Blast. So the advantage of Fire Blast over like Ice Lance is that it doesn't have a travel time if you're trying to do instant damage. So let's say this guy's like 1% HP, something like pretty close, and you need to be able to do like instant damage because you're worried that the travel time will give him time to react. Fire Blast is like good in that way because it has no travel time. So it can be good for finishing off kills if the CC is running out and you think that the travel time of Ice Lance will not mean that you won't kill. That's when it could be useful. Another time that it's useful is if you get an impact. I don't really know how I can generate one. It's like a 10% chance on any of your spells, but I haven't really shown you guys impact yet. But essentially you'll get those procs for it, and then it's a 2-second stun. So here's one now. So next Fire Blast stuns the target. That's basically the other use case for Fire Blast. It's also really good for eating grounding totems and warrior spell reflect as well. So those are pretty much the kind of tips for Fire Blast, because in CATA, grounding totem, you don't need to target it to kill it. You just press Fire Blast on anybody and it will eat the grounding. So it's very cool for that. Frostfire Bolt, you never hard cast this ever. You pretty much just use it when you get the procs. Cone of Cold, really good because it slows them by 70% for 8 seconds, and it has the root due to the talent that we take, the improved cone, and you can shatter lances into that, and it's essentially the same thing as the as the Fingers of Frost. The only thing you lose out on is the 25% more damage on the Fingers procs, but like if you have the target Nova'd, you can still shatter stuff into that. You just won't get the increased damage from the Ice Lance. But Frostbolt will do the same amount of damage into it, so it's still good. Keep in mind that it does DR with your Pet Nova, so you don't want to DR it too much there. You want to be very careful, mindful of your DRs. I recommend tracking your root DR on your Gladi so that you can see when it's off. And then we have Invisibility. So Invisibility is most of the time used in the starting area. You basically just press it, and then you'll start the game in Invis. That'll allow you to kind of position yourself properly for the game. Maybe land some CC from stealth is what you're going to do primarily. So you're going to, the gates are going to open 3, 2, 1. You press Invis, you go Invis, you try to dodge any AoE from the enemy team. Like Fire Mages often will go and try to Flame Strike. You want to be careful that you don't just run into enemy AoE. So you want to kind of, whenever the gates open, maybe don't. Let's take Dalaran Sewers, for example. You don't want to instantly walk up the ramp. You kind of just want to sit on the edge, let them use their AoE. Then you can maybe walk up later, or maybe you'll have to walk all the way around. There is another really cool part that's kind of hard to use, but like let's say you Invis, you can actually kind of eat a spell with it, like a, what is it called? That was a really bad example, but it kind of acts like a Shadow Meld if you use it correctly, but it's extremely difficult to use it in this way. So like if I Invis on this mage and I cast a Frostbolt and he goes Invis, it kind of like, oh, maybe they removed that. I thought you could use it like a meld, but maybe someone in the comments knows. I don't know. You guys teach me. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much just a starting room spell. Start the game in Invis. Mana Shield is really good. It's like an extra barrier. You don't really ever have mana problems if you're sitting in Mage Armor. So if you're sitting in Mage Armor, you can use this pretty free without worrying about it. I would say maybe be a little bit cautious about using it in Frost Armor. But yeah, it's just an extra damage absorb that you can press. Just going to reduce your mana instead of your health, which is nice. And then Mage Ward. So Mage Ward is not as good for Frost as it is for Fire, because you aren't running Molten Shields. You don't get the guaranteed blazing speeds from it. But it is good into classes that do Frost, Fire, or Arcane damage. So you can use that into Hunter to dodge, to absorb a little bit of Arcane shot damage. You can use it into other Fire or Frost mages. Maybe Shamans when they have Flame Shock on you or something like that. And then let's go over Cold Snap. So like I said, Cold Snap is going to when activated, this spell finishes the cooldown on all frost spells recently cast. So something that's really important is thinking about when to snap. I think a lot of mages think that they should never snap before block, because then that means they only have one block in the game. However, there are a lot of times that you are going to be snapping before block to get either a second Veins, a second Orb, or a second Deep Freeze. So a very common scenario, let's just take a very popular comp right now. Let's take Ret DK Disc. What they mainly do into, like, let's say me playing a Frost RMP, is what they're going to do is they're just going to W key my healer. They're just going to all in the healer a lot of the times. And there's no point for you to sit on your 2 blocks at this point. So a really good thing that you can do in the opener is Veins Orb, and then snap and put out a second Orb. And this is going to generate you so many procs. So like Veins, Orb, Snap, Orb. And then now you can see the Icelands procs that just keep coming in, and like it's infinite. Like you guys need to be taking advantage of using snap aggressively and knowing when it's a good idea to snap or like save it defensively. So I would say one case of this is it's mainly going to come down to what you're fighting. So this is going to take like a bit of practice, a lot of practice. I have many games, like almost 400 games played in CATA already. So I've been learning what matchups to use this into. But something like, we'll take 2 mage killer comps. We'll take jungle and thug cleave, which is jungle will be feral hunter and thug cleave will be rogue hunter. You have to be very careful to do this, to double or to snap in the opener. It's almost never worth it into these comps. So there's going to be like some comps where if they train healer and they make it obvious that they're training healer because you see positionally that they are, that'll be a time where you want to definitely commit the double orb or whatever. It would be more value if you could get your deep on cooldown too, but sometimes you can't always squeeze every little bit of value out of deep or out of cold snap. So like I said, this ability is going to come with a lot of practice. There's really cool things you can do, like obviously you can double deep, like deep, that's really cool. But you can see a mistake I made is when I went for the double deep, I didn't orb before. Like I should have orbed, deeped, snapped, deep, right? Because I actually deeped without, or sorry, I snapped without sending orb first, so I kind of lost some value there, right? I didn't get my 2 orbs, I still have my 1. But yeah, I'm just gonna leave that for you to think about a little bit. It's definitely something that you need to think about. I have a cold snap macro here. This just basically, if you have Icy Veins off cooldown, it will use it before you snap. This just ensures that you never snap without veinsing. So you got to be a little bit careful when you spam it though. Like you have to be very careful not to spam snap because it might use the second Icy Veins as well. So you guys can choose to use that macro if you want. If you just want to press it individually, I do that sometimes as well. But there are some situations where you just really need to like snap deep someone off, and having to use the extra like finger movement to press veins and then snap, like that split second could actually cost you like the warrior noticing he should reflect, or just something going wrong, right? So I kind of like to have the macro as a little failsafe. So now let's move on. Remove curse. Remove curse is very strong. You can remove hex, you can remove agony from warlock, you can remove I wonder if there's another one. There's like the curse that increases the damage that the lock does to the 2-minute long one. I would say that one is probably the least valuable to dispel. Agony is high value, and then hex is infinite value. You definitely want to be dispelling hex when your healer's in hex. So the way I use this is on my self macro for this, somewhere around here. Right there. So basically what you need to know about this macro is that if I am not targeting a friendly player and my mouse is not hovering over someone, it'll use it on myself. But if I am mousing over someone, it will use remove curse on them. So this allows you to remove curse in the world and in battlegrounds. And then in arena, I have 2 separate macros for my healers and my DPS classes. So whenever I'm playing with people, I'll plug them into my macro here. Like if I started playing with whoever, you know, just /cast, just put their name in there, and then I can just press it and it'll remove their curse. This is, I recommend doing it this way over using the mouse over on the frames, because it's just inefficient to sit there and mouse over the frame to dispel it. You'd rather not have to do that with your mouse, right? But it's kind of nice to have the self macro also have the mouse over component in it for if you're ever in the world or in a BG and you need to remove curse, for example. Sheep. We already know what sheep does. It's a polymorph for 8 seconds. Last 8 seconds in this expansion. Any sort of damage will break sheep, so you don't want to do any damage into it. You can't, yeah, like I said, you can't do any damage or it'll break. It also heals the target to full 35-yard range. Like I said about the macro, you just want to have the pet passive in it, and that's it. For this, I use target focus. I don't use 1, 2, 3 sheep. You could use 1, 2, 3 if you wanted to. It's personal preference. Then we have spell steal. Spell steal steals a beneficial magic effect. So if you look at the target, you'll see there's 2 buffs on them. One is a magic effect, the one that's highlighted in white, and one is not. So every spell highlighted in white is something that you can steal. So like I said, I'll put on a bunch of buffs, and you can see all the spells that I can steal. So going for certain spells is pretty nice. Like you can see I stole his Icy Veins, and then that, you know, is pretty valuable because it essentially gives me another Veins and takes away his. There's a lot of spells in the game that, like, it's important to know which ones to steal. So barrel proc is going to be the most important, the predatory swiftness. So I recommend getting this weak aura here. This will basically let you know that whenever the feral spends his combo points and gets this instant cast proc, it's very important to remove that because this gives them instant cyclone. It's very difficult because whenever they spend their proc, you essentially have until the global cooldown is over to steal it. So one thing that's really good is to, like, pre-clean the feral. So whenever you're, like, fighting one, spell steal until he's got absolutely no buffs, and then as soon as he gets it, you purge it. Another one I can think of is Blessing of Sacrifice, Freedom, or Blessing of Protection. So that's Bop, Freedom, and Sac. Those are very important to purge off. Demon Soul from Warlock, very important to purge. Into Mage, Icy Veins, Pyro procs, or Ice Barrier is very important to purge. Into Hunters, their Freedom is very important. Rogues don't have any. Boomies don't really have any, I don't believe. Warlocks we've already covered. Demon Soul. And then, yeah, Warriors don't have any. Trying to think of other classes in the game. Trying to think of the healers maybe. Oh, Shaman, you can purge Riptide. It's not bad to do that. Yeah, like I said, that's a pretty decent starting list of spells to purge. I'm sure I can whip up kind of like a similar list. I made a list on Discord for retail. But I might look into making something similar on CATA as well. Yeah, like I made a list of, like, important things to purge on retail. But I'll probably make a list similar to this on CATA coming pretty soon for those of you guys who don't know what the high value dispels are. It's kind of hard to come up with it on the top of your head. And then we have Arcane Explosion. This is mainly just used for getting people out of stealth. Never really used for damaging purposes. Doesn't really do much damage at all. You just want to try to get people out of stealth with this. Blizzard, same thing. Just for stopping people from re-stealthing. Let's say that I'm a rogue and I go over here behind the pillar because I want to get a re-stealth. It's not a bad thing to just put a Blizzard down. You don't want to go too crazy with it though, you know? Like, because it's a lot of mana. Fireball, you essentially never press this. You could get away with not having it bound. I do it because when you do get a Frostfire proc, you could potentially use it on that to leave a dot on the target. Oh, actually, Fireball doesn't leave a dot. Never mind. Yeah, it's worthless. You can just remove that from your bar. No point. And then Scorch is good because if you get kicked on Frost, Like let's say I'm casting Frostbolt and the mage kicks me, you can kind of just, after the blanket silence is over, you could still do a little bit of damage if needed with Scorch. Doesn't do that much, but it's better than just sitting there and doing absolutely nothing. And then we go into Ritual Refreshment. That's basically just your table in the 3s. In 2s, you'll have to, because you need two different players to make this work. So you use it, 2 other people have to click on it, and then you make your table in a 3s match. In 2v2, you'll have to make food for both of your teammates, so you just have to make food like this. And then trade it to your boy. The 3 armors, Molten Armor as a Frost Mage, we essentially never ever play this. You could say there is a very niche situation in openers where you could maybe start out of stealth with it so that you have a slightly higher critical strike chance. But let's be real, you pretty much never do that. The main 2 armors that you'll be sitting in are Mage Armor because of the mana regen and the duration of harmful magic effects. Read that last part and like realize how OP that is. Duration of all harmful magic effects reduced by 35%. So let's look right here. Let's cast a sheep on him, right? How long does that last? 5 seconds. Down from 8. Whereas if this guy, like a normal target, like a class that's not mage or a mage that's in frost armor, 8-second sheep, right? Like think of how valuable that is. Let's also look at blanket silence. Blanket silence is what? It was like 2.5 seconds, I believe. Whereas it's a 4-second silence on a mage who's in frost armor or no armor. So yeah, mage armor very, very OP. Gives you a lot of mana, reduces all magical CC effects on you. You play this like majority of games, except for when you're being trained very hard. Then you have to swap to frost armor, and that's why we're running the glyph. So it's not as punishable to run frost armor because you get the mana back still. And that is all. Slowfall is just a trash buff. You want to use it on like a global where you're not doing anything. Like let's say you're repositioning, instead of just walking over here for a couple globals. Like while you're walking, just throw it up. Throw your buff up. So you want to try to fill dead globals with that to cover some important buffs like Ice Barrier so you don't get instantly purged on it. And then your buff, Arcane Intellect, Mana, Spell Power. Very good to always have that up. Alright, so that's all of the spells. Now let's, now that we kind of have that understanding, I want to go over the burst rotation really quickly. So Frostbolt into Pet Nova, into Ice Lance is going to be the main way that you're doing damage. Sometimes you want to do damage with like let's say you can't get the Frostbolt off, you just want to do Pet Nova into Ice Lance. That's another good source. But the only way that becomes like a really consistent source is if you have Orb down. So Orb plays a very crucial role in your burst. So let's start with let's just start by doing the burst rotation. So I'll send in the Orb, I'll pop my Veins, my Unused Trinket, I'll send in my Frostbolt, and then I'll Pet Nova and double Lance, and then use my procs as I get them from the Orb. So we'll do it here. One shot. And now I'll do it on this guy who does significantly less damage, so you guys can see maybe more of a, like, yeah, we'll just do it on this guy as well. So we'll send it in. And then you see the Orb is generating more procs. If you don't have procs here, you can go and Nova him so that you get the Cone root. Maybe root him, cast another one, Fire Blast, and then maybe you can fill this downtime with another Frostbolt. Cone again, Lance into it. Early Frost is off cooldown. I'll send that in. So that was like worst case example, like worst case scenario on damage. Like my Orb only gave me 1 proc basically, and I didn't get like any Frostfire bolts. So now I want to show you kind of like the double Orb rotation. This is whenever you are cold snapping aggressively and you want to only do instant cast damage. So let's say there's a kick available and you only have the ability to do instant cast damage. You will send in your Orb. You will Pet Nova for Ice Lance procs, and then you would just continue spamming procs as you get them, and you'll get 1,000,000 of them because you double orbed. And you want to make sure your pet attacks here. So you want to put the pet on him, Orb, Cold Snap, Veins, Orb, summon the pet, or get the Pet Nova down, send in your procs, send the Frostfire in. A little bit unlucky that it procced, maybe impact him there. And then we can do it on this guy as well to see it in maybe a bit more realistic damage. Since I'm hitting a slightly undergeared target. If you really want to burst here too, like you could pre-mirrors, like if you're in a duel or something. So yeah, I'll try to do my damage here now. So yeah, we'll pre-mirrors, we'll send in the orb, we snap, orb, pop the veins. Maybe we cast a Frostbolt this time. We don't want to Frost Nova yet, or Pet Nova, because we want it to wait for the fingers. And you can see with those double orbs, you're just getting so many procs that it's insane. But you saw at the damage, or you saw at the start of that rotation, I didn't Pet Nova right away. And the reason why this is because I had a fingers proc already. So Pet Nova gives you 2 fingers procs, right? So if you have a fingers proc, you don't want to really Pet Nova because it's an overlap of procs. I think that is more value than shattering the Frostbolt. I'm not 100% on that because shattering your Frostbolt is very important. But like, let's say you have a proc here. You would want to just spend these, right? Like, you wouldn't want to Pet Nova right now because you already have a proc, and this is what would happen. I'll just do it for comparison. It's like that proc that you had before is now just gone. And if you have this Nova, you don't want to Lance into it right away. You want to see if you can maybe shatter it with the Frostbolt first, because using an Ice Lance proc into a Nova doesn't add any damage to it. So if you have that Nova, you can potentially shatter that with a Frostbolt first before you send in your Lances. But yep, that's going to be the damage rotation. Now I kind of want to cover some gameplay. So I want to watch a couple of games from a session that I had, and then we can break down some of what happened. So let me find a VOD of an RMP session that I just had. Right here.
Joel, did you get on?
We'll go over some games. Try to find some that we won and some that we lost. And point out why we won and why we lost. Okay, so I don't know if we won this game or whatever, but we're still just gonna watch it. So what happens here? We're running in, we pressed invisibility from the start, we're sitting in Mage armor, we have all of our buffs. Essentially the buffs you can use in the starting room is Arcane Intellect, Frost Armor, and Mana Shield in your armor. You don't want to press Mage Ward in the starting room because it goes away when the gates open, and so does Slow Fall. So our goal here as RMP, I'm gonna try not to say too much about like the strat as RMP, but more or less focus on my globals as a mage. So we're more or less just waiting for Sack to fall right now. He sends the blind, so I cross the DK with a Nova Blanket Ring, and then I pop my Veins, on use Trinket, I get Tricks, I throw out my Orb so that I can generate more instant cast damage. And now what I really want to do is start getting my procs off, because this orb is going to generate you more. And if you're sitting on 2 the whole time, that's not going to be beneficial. So I'm sending in my Ice Lances. I'm spell stealing a bit here to try to get wings. If you guys didn't know, oh yeah, that's another one for spell steal. Look at this. You can steal wings. So he pops wings. I press spell steal. Spell steal. Spell steal. I'm just trying to get the wings, trying to get it. I finally got him. If you don't spell steal wings, you're going to take a lot more damage. I get stunned here, and the DK tries to Dark Sim my blink, so I sit it. Don't give him Dark Sim. I give him spell steal instead. I'm sitting in the dome. You can see my healer gets repped into Hodge, into Strang. So I trade out the block, kind of at a decent HP. And then you can see we do our go. So we do a double fear. I deep freeze the healer. I start attacking him on it. And then I do a cold snap here. So the reason I snapped here is, let's look at what's on cooldown, right? So I already had to send my first block. What's on cooldown? My orb, my veins, and my ring. So that is that's like enough, right? Like, I'm not going to really be able to get a double deep off here. Actually, I deep first, then I snap. So now you can see, look at all these cooldowns come off. Ready? Boom. So now I have a second veins, and you can see my veins, it still has 4 seconds left. Trade the block. So now I can pretty safely snap here. So I deep first, then I snap, and I instantly Vaynes after that, send out the other orb. I Pet Nova all these people for one, to make them not be able to move. And then I also want to get all my procs. And you can see I'm not going for the Frostbolt here. I have a billion melee DPS on me. There's no way I can cast anything. So, and then you can see I have a Frostfire and a Lance. I sent in the Frostfire, which was a mistake. That's why, because now look, I have no more damage, right? If I would have Lanced and then Frostfired, I would have had more damage. You can see the enemy bops. So I'm trying to purge it. Trying to purge bop here. I double Frost Nova and start running around the corner so that I can't be attacked by these two DPS as I'm waiting out hypothermia. You can see I'm keeping my pet on him though to add that little bit of damage. Now I Cone of Cold root the DK as I kite him back around the pillar. I'm really just trying to live on this hypothermia. My healer grips me. I get gripped back, and then I blink back to the pillar. We trade PS. So you can see how I'm positioning in this game. Like when you have two melee training you, you can't sit and tank the damage. Like you have to be constantly running around the corners, running around a pillar, rooting them out of their healer's line so they can't get instantly dispelled. Keep in mind, Dispel and CATA has no cooldown. So I'm really just playing super defensively here. The DK AMS is aggressively. The Rogue sends the kidney here, so now I'm trying to get a little bit of damage off, but I'm looking to see if the DK is in kick range. He's not. I should have Pet Nova'd this Frostbolt now that I'm looking back at it. You can see my healer gets full Hodge here, so we're definitely really scared at this point. I kick the healer on his Flash Heal cast, basically just so that I could try to peel these DPS a little bit, because when he's kicked, he can't Dispel now. So I get the Cone root on the DK, he has to sit that full. I'm pumping some instant cast damage. I use double Ice Lance into Pet Nova. I sent a Frost Fireball with the Ice Lance proc, wasn't good. So I cast a Polymorph onto DK. I get stunned, so I press Blink. And then you can see the healer is casting with Aura Mastery. So I try to Sheep. The DK gets out. He trinkets my Sheep and kicks me. So I cast a Deep Freeze on him since I'm Arcane locked. And then I go for the instant ring. So something I didn't mention before is Ring of Frost is actually on the same DR. It's kind of weird to think about, but try to wrap your head around this. So Ring of Frost is two different DRs. It is, for one, it DRs Sheep, but it also DRs Deep Freeze. Not Stun DR, just Deep Freeze. So if I ring this guy, right, we'll notice this. It's an 8-second sheep, quote sheep. So if I sheep off, it's 4 seconds because it's DR, right? Now deep normally lasts 5 seconds. So if I deep this guy, it's 2.5. So ring actually DRs with Deep Freeze in this expansion. So you can see this is something that you might have to do sometimes. So I cast deep on the healer. I'm still Arcane locked. I can't cast sheep, but I still want to get something off of it. So I go for a ring. Even though it is half, it's enough CC at times that it's still worth to go for that. Because then look, I have kick off, so I can actually blanket the healer off of that. And that's going to cover the double fear so that the double fear sits and you can't instantly dispel. And that gives me time to load up a Frostbolt into an Ice Lance. Boom, big damage. I have my Pet Nova coming up pretty soon, so I load up another Frostbolt. And I Lance with it, and he goes down. So yeah, you can see pretty decent game. I'm always like trying to hold my blink till the DK grips, because it's really bad if you blink and then get gripped. We can watch one more game, potentially. We'll see. Not this one. We got pooped on that game. I want to find an interesting game, one that displays a lot of interactions. Oh, this might be a good one. I'm trying to display games where you're under a lot of heat, because I think a lot of you guys will kind of understand a lot of this, and you'll be able to put it into practice if you're not being trained. So I don't want to show you clips where I'm just sitting there free casting or doing whatever. I want to show you clips where you are going to be getting trained brutally and you need to like position in a way where you don't take damage and you can still try to win, like, and get pressure out while you're being annihilated. So this game I think might be an example. I don't remember if we won this one. We did beat this comp a couple times that night, but this might not be one of those. If it's not, we'll try to find it. But let's take a look at what I do here in the opener. I press Invis. You can see into this match, since we're fighting a hunter, I am going to sit in Frost Armor, and I have my Intellect, Barrier, and Mana Shield. So the goal here, we get a sap on Pally. We want to create a 3v1 situation, RMP style. I Nova Blanket DK into Ring. I have to Trinket the Silent Shot to get it down. And then I cast a Resheep on Healer to give time for my Priest to walk over and press Fear on him. Then I load up the Frostbolt, Ice Lance, Frostfire Bolt. The Healer Trinket Sacks with Ross already on the Hunter, so we don't really want to attack the Hunter anymore. So what we do is we swap the Paladin. So I Cone of Cold him, so I can get a... So that's a way that you can shatter your Frostfire Bolt procs, is you want to shatter those more with Novas rather than your Ice Lance procs, right? So I have a Cone, or sorry, I have a Frostfire Bolt. It's still worth to try to shatter this. You just don't want to use a Ice Lance proc to do it. So I Cone of Cold him and then send in the Frostfire Bolt proc. He has wings up, so I'm going to try to purge that probably in a sec. But instead I opt to Sheep the Hunter to stop the scatter trap. So you can see we are going Hunter, pressuring him a bunch, right? Pally Trinket Sacks, the Hunter has Ross. This guy's never going to die through those cooldowns. We know this, so we call a swap, right? But for this go, we want to make sure we have triple cross, if possible. So DK is still stuck over here. I cast a Polymorph onto the Hunter. 1, to cross him so that he doesn't interrupt us on the go. 2, it also stops Scatter Trap. And then you'll see I use my Impact proc. I have a Focus Impact. I put that on DK to cross him. The Hunter trinkets this to get it. I root the DK off, and I'm consistently lining now because the goal here is to avoid damage. This is kind of like a Mage killer comp. And then you can see Rapid Fire has been popped. This is a very, very scary cooldown from Hunters. And with AMZ down, I wouldn't be contributing too much to the damage on Paladin anyways, because anti-magic zone is like a big magic damage reduction. So I'm really just trying to line the Hunter here. My healer does a really good job of trading pain suppression at a very high percentage of HP to respect the rapid fire. But you can see I'm lining the whole game, lining the Hunter. The Hunter cannot touch me. I'm still lining him. Look at see this pillar in between us? Still lining him. Still lining him. Still lining him. Still lining him. Whole rapid fire gone. Now I Pet Nova him over here because I'm smart with my pet placement, and I didn't have him on following me at the time. I had him attacking Pally, so he was always sitting right here. And you can see I use Pet Nova to not only just root the Hunter over there, but it also gives me my damage. So then I actually am forced into block here because of Hodge, but I come out. Hunter has no trinket. He's sitting a full blind, and the Pally is really low, so I blink on top of him. We'll back that up just 1 second. So I have Necrotics on me, which reduces a lot of healing. I had about a 10k Necrotic on me. I block it off. And now this guy's really low. He's Garroted. I want to continue this go. The Pally still has bubble. So what do I use? I use my blink, even though I'm not in a stun. I use it for mobility here. And I silence the Paladin. And then he has to bubble. My Priest is really good. Pre-cast the Mass Dispel. The Mass Dispel hits the bubble off. And then I deep him. And we kill him. And then you can see I cold snapped right there for Veins. And yeah, that's going to be like how you want to try to position and play into stuff like Rogues, Hunters, DKs. That's going to be very important. There was one more game where I double snapped in opener. I would love to find that one if possible. Don't think it was this one. Wasn't this one? Yeah, I think it was back here actually. See if I can find it. Yeah, there's a lot of times where you're just going to double. I think this might be one. We'll see. Yeah, this is one. This is one where we gas pedal in the opener. Okay, so you can see I'm sitting in Invis, and what do I do at the start? Well, Lux can cast Rain of Fire. Boomies can come in. And see how they're running at us? They're just running directly at us. So I kind of hide in this corner to dodge Rain of Fire. Because I don't want to get found. I do get found to the mushrooms. So we get a sap on the shaman. We want to go the Boomy. I Nova CS ring. We open Boomy. I send in the orb. I pop the veins. I pop the casket. I have PI. I have tricks. I load up a sheep. A half sheep. I Ice Lance. I Frostfire. I Cone. I Nova into Lance. I get an impact proc. My early frost is off cooldown, so I send that in. Early frost into frostbolt. Lance. I use my impact. I focus impact the healer because we run out of CC. If we want to look at the CC chain here while we're doing damage, we can do that as well. We have blind. He spirit links. We have no sheep DR, no stun DR. So I impact because it's on its own DR. Then I am continuously doing damage. I cold snap and I send in my other orb because I want to generate a lot more instant cast pressure here because they're all really low and stun DR is coming off pretty soon. My veins is over, so I probably pretty soon pop my second veins. There's my second veins now. I'm still generating more and more procs. So there's another Ice Lance. I have a Frostfire, more Ice Lances. More Ice Lances, and now you can notice here, I'll back it up just a sec. Right. So yeah, like lancing. I impact the shaman there short. I'm holding on to my counterspell. Throw another lance. I throw my Frostfire. I have no Fingers of Frost proc right now, so I Pet Nova everybody to get more fingers. I try to eat the grounding with a Fire Blast. I kick the shaman, I blanket silence the shaman as he walks into bomb. I get knocked off. I press a barrier. I'm trying to get in line. My healer grips me. Ice Lance, and he goes down. So yeah, you can see like some games you're going to be like with the pressure, you want to be using your cold snap aggressively like that so that you can kind of just use the momentum that you have to potentially just win in openers a lot of time. So that's like kind of an okay game for it. I think we'll end the guide there as we are approaching quite a bit of time, like almost 1.5 hours. I'm trying to remember if I left anything out. I think we covered a lot of it. We covered like positioning, being trained, armors, defensive kit, mobility kit, utility kit, rotations, gear, profession, stat priority, how to reforge, the playstyle a little bit. I guess like maybe there's some macros I forgot. We could check real quick. So let's go here. No. Oh yeah. So you want to harm a macro in your deep freeze because a lot of times people will either like meld and it'll make you attack someone different, or for example, mirror images actually drops target. I forgot to mention that. So harm is good because it'll make sure it won't do it unless it's like on an enemy, not just like some random thing. So like if Hunter feign deaths and you target the pet, it won't just deep the pet. So that having that is very nice. That's the focus one. I have target focus spell steal. I have a cursor macro for my blizzard, so I can just do it without having to click the little circle on the ground. The counterspell macros, we have already showed these off, but yeah, Arena 1, 2, 3 mixed with normal CS and focus, Frostbolt with pet attack, Sheep with pet passive. I have a focus Fire Blast for impact. Lance, I don't use this macro actually. Snap with the veins that uses on use trinket. Wand, I guess, yeah. This one just makes it to where when you spam the bind, it doesn't like cancel it, so you can guaranteed wand. The pet move to macro, we can show that off. Let's see, pet move to right there, / pet move to. And then I use shift 1, 2, 3 for targeting binds. So I target arena 1, 2, and 3. And then I have focus as the same. So focus arena 1, 2, 3. So I can use my key binds to target. You don't want to be clicking targets. And then I get out of block with this. It's just an all. It's just a general. I call it aura because it's a general. It cancels all auras. So it cancels block, invis, slow fall, cast pet follow, stops casting. I'm actually going to remove the slow fall because I use this to stop casting, like to juke people like this. And I don't want to cancel my slow fall with that, so I'll take that out. And then I think that's probably it. I think that's all the macros. And yeah, we'll just call it there, guys. We'll call the guide there. So hopefully you all enjoyed. Oh, sorry, compositions. Frost Mage, Sub Rogue, Holy Priest is really good, or sorry, Disc Priest. You could play double mage with like fire mage, frost mage is pretty decent. Feral mage priest is very good. You could play mage lock, like affliction with shaman, is really good as a frost mage. You could play god comp with shadow priest and resto shaman. 2v2 you have either disc priest or sub rogue. That is really good to play either one of those. And I think that's about it. RMP is definitely your best, like sub rogue, frost mage, disc priest is like the best comp you can play as frost right now. But yep, that's gonna do it, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed the guide. Check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/Aeghis. I'm live usually every day, every 6 days, or 6 days a week rather. Streaming high rated gameplay all the time. So check me out. Hope you guys enjoyed the guide, and peace out.